Hi everybody, this is Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports, and UFC 220 is in the books, and what a night it was. No change at the top, however, is both Daniel Cormier, the light heavyweight champion, and Stipe Miocic, the heavyweight champion, retained their titles. Miocic defeated Francis Ngannou, and here's the shocker, in 5 rounds. The fight went the distance. Nobody saw that coming with these two big guys. Miocic just grounded the decision out. He won by scores of 50-44. I scored it 50-43. I had two 10-8 rounds in there. I gave rounds 3 and 4 10-8 to Miocic because I felt like Ngannou did nothing in those rounds. But it was a clear Miocic victory. As it was in the light heavyweight championship bout when Daniel Cormier finished Volkan Ozdemir in the second round at 2 minutes of the second round. Ozdemir got the title fight after only 3 UFC fights by scoring these spectacular knockouts, but he couldn't do anything against Daniel Cormier. Cormier is just too much of a veteran, and in my mind remains one of the great fighters, not only in UFC history, but in MMA history. Those 2 losses to Jon Jones really hurt him with a lot of MMA fans, but if you look at his record in the wins over Josh Barnett and Frank Mir and Anthony Johnson and Alexander Gustafsson, and you go down the list, he's lost only to Jon Jones twice, and one of them was overturned because of a drug test failure. Cormier is a sensational fighter, I think one of the top 5 all-time in the world. You just have to give it to the man. He's a great grappler. And I don't really know where he goes next. On the broadcast, on the UFC broadcast tonight, they were talking about potentially him going up to heavyweight to fight Stipe Miocic. And while I would love to see that, I don't know that it's all that feasible. Daniel, who was the Strikeforce Grand Prix heavyweight champion a few years ago, has said he doesn't really want to go back up and fight those big guys. He's been having trouble making the weight. He's been coming in right on the button, and it looks like, they had to use the towel again at UFC 220 when he weighed in on Friday. That's always an issue. But I don't think Daniel really wants to see himself going up there against those big guys and trying to carry that weight. So I think, maybe a rematch with Alexander Gustafsson will be in order for DC. But I think Cormier cemented himself as one of the elite fighters ever just by taking apart Ozdemir, who I think will be a good fighter someday, but just did not have any of the experience needed to deal with an experienced grappler, a guy who could give and take like Daniel Cormier. And that's really what the answer on the main event was. Now, my question here is Stipe Miocic going to get credit for being the great, smart fighter that he is, or is he going to get criticized for not finishing the fight? I could see both things happening. I said after the 4th round, I think Stipe needs to finish. I wrote that on Twitter, and a lot of people were saying, And what I meant by that was no, he was clearly in command of the fight, but I meant he needed to finish to get style points. That's how you send a message to people. Cormier went out there, and he finished Ozdemir. And Stipe, he weathered that early storm, and Ngannou, as everybody expected, came firing the big shots, and he landed a couple, and Miocic showed a great chin. He used a lot of lateral movement. He moved his head very well, and he landed some really good counter shots, so I thought he did a great job in defending Ngannou's striking. After about the 1st round and a half, Ngannou really was gassed, and Stipe did a smart thing. He laid on top of him, and he made Ngannou carry his weight. The problem, though, was Stipe didn't finish the fight, and it was kind of boring. It was, you never saw any, he didn't really come close to a submission in the fight. And then Ngannou just laid there on all 4s or sometimes on his back, and it was just kind of a slow final 3.5 rounds. I think Miocic, you have to give him credit. He did what he has to do to win the fight. But in this business, it's an entertainment business. You want to send a message, and you want to go out there and say, hey, I beat this really bad guy in a devastating manner. And I think he would have done that by knockout. So we'll see what's next for him. I think Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou may see each other down the road, but Francis needs to get in some fights, and he needs to work on his grappling. I don't know if anybody else other than Miocic will be able to stand up to him. Maybe Cain Velasquez could if Cain comes back and is healthy. But I think Cain Velasquez would be the guy to really challenge Stipe again, if he is healthy. Certainly Fabricio Verdum would be in the running and deserve a shot. Verdum is an outstanding heavyweight, but I think the list of feasible opponents for Stipe is getting small right now. Francis will be back, I do believe, because I think he's a hard worker. Every time I go over to the UFC Performance Institute, I see him there. He lives at that gym, and I think he just needs to learn to work on that other part of his game. But Stipe Miocic would have done himself some favors by finding a way to finish that fight, getting a Kimura, finding a way to get that choke, or just, really putting some power on those shots. But, hey, you have to give the guy credit. He stared down the biggest hitter maybe in the history of the UFC, and he left the ring, as I predicted before the fight, with the heavyweight championship. Well, that's going to do it for me. Please read all our content. Our Dan Wetzel has coverage as well as I do on UFC 220. Appreciate you being here. Until next time, everybody, we'll talk to you soon. I'm Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports.